Morning, it's 10 o'clock and we're in London. 3 months ago we invited ambulance crews and members of the public to debate the ambulance dispute. Now yesterday, during the storms, most of those crews were back to work, part of the tremendous effort put in by the emergency services when the wind was blowing hard. But today, with strikes breaking out again in some areas, we've asked the crews to come back to continue the debate. It seems that the majority of the public still support the ambulance staff case. But do they support strike action still? Now, some crews feel the only way to win the battle is to go on strike. Their leadership disagrees and is pushing them in the other direction. And we'd like to know what you think. We want your views. If you feel that the ambulance staff, at the end of the day, if necessary, should go on strike, then please ring the top number. If you feel that under no circumstances should they go on strike, then ring the bottom number. Those numbers will be appearing throughout this programme, and we'll have the results in about half an hour's time as the debate in the studio draws to an end. If I can start off by going back to ambulance crews, I want to know what has changed in your weekly financial situation now when you're confining yourselves only to 999 calls, and they aren't actually in all cases being put through to you, in a lot of cases not being put through to you. To what extent is your financial life becoming rougher and rougher? What are the pounds, shillings and pence of life now? What about yours?
Well, my girlfriend and I, we've got a mortgage that we've had since August down in Brighton. And up until then, we were managing to break even. Since the dispute has begun, we are now constantly £200 overdrawn, as I'm sure the vast majority of my colleagues are.
But to put it in pound notes, I mean, what are you getting per week now that compared with what you were getting per week before the whole dispute started?
Well, we're now in East Sussex, we're on 20% of our wages, which roughly works out at 60 pence an hour.
So you're only getting 20% of what you were getting before the debate broke out. And how often are you actually sitting waiting for a 999 call, which doesn't necessarily come through? How often are you working, in other words?
Well, we're working very well. We've set up our own system, which is very efficient. Some say it's too efficient, but we are still answering calls from the public.
So you're doing the 999 work, but only the 999 work that you were doing. Well, that type of work.
We're still doing emergency work, but we're not taking calls from our control.
For 20% of the money you used to get. Can I go to the young lady and ask you for your financial analysis? What's your daily life like in terms of money?
Luckily, I've got a boyfriend that sort of supports me really well. But in London, we're not getting paid at all. We've had our pay stopped, and we've also been told by our management that they're going to take money from our wages when we go back to work.
How many weeks have you been getting no pay at all?
I think it's, what, 12?
This is the first. We've got half pay November.
Half November.
Half pay December, with some stopped out that they overpaid us in November. And now we've got a letter saying that he overpaid us again in December and he's going to take it back when we get paid again.
Now, to what extent are you all still trying to actually be available to answer emergency calls, whether they come in by the 999 route or by the other route, which is now
we are manning all our shifts as we would normally if we were getting paid.
So you're being available for work for as many hours now as you were before the dispute breaks out?
And more in some cases.
Are any of you actually on strike?
Yes. Yeah.
You are actually on full strike?
We're on full strike. That's from yesterday.
Now, that is actually in defiance of what your leadership wants you to do.
What they want us to do, but not what our station wants us to do.
Why have you decided to defy the leadership and maybe deflate the image of ambulance crews in the public eye?
I would say we're not going to deflate the image. If we go back to the money for a second, in my last pay packet, I was paid 78 hours pay, but then they deducted 118 hours for the hours I hadn't worked. So the only money I received last month was a tax rebate.
Sorry, let me just get that right. They said you should be paid for 78 hours.
They promised, they put this lie out.
But you mustn't be paid for 100 and something hours.
For the hours I hadn't worked,
they took the money back.
They took it back. So the only thing on my, before deductions, I owed the London Ambulance Service money. And because of a tax rebate, that is all I received in my pay packet, was a tax rebate, no money.
Was it that final financial punishment, if one uses that word, which made you decide very firmly to vote for strike action?
Yes, that's them what put us down that line. Because
are you on indefinite strike, or just a strike?
We can review at any time, but we've said for at least 2 weeks we will stay on strike.
Can I move to Donna Covey? You are the union chief negotiator in this area. Before I talk about what your hopes, if any, are about sorting out this dispute, What would you want to say to those chaps?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that we have to make clear about this strike action that's happened in North West London is it's not a matter of people defying their national leadership. It's a matter of members in London being disloyal to their own colleagues. There was a meeting on Tuesday when representatives from all the London ambulance services got together. I didn't have a vote at that meeting. It was ambulance crews had votes at that meeting, and they voted by 57 votes to 12 not to go on strike. And I think that was a democratic decision made by your own colleagues. It's not me that you're letting down when you do this. It's yourself and your own colleagues that you're letting down.
Well, you must have a chance to reply to that.
Yes,
disloyal to your own
No,
colleagues.
not
Disloyal to a majority vote which said don't.
No, we had a democratic vote in London North West UP members, and we voted by over 2 to 1 that we would go on strike. So we are being loyal to our membership in the North West London.
All right, well, what you're saying is in one particular block, it was a democratic vote. You're saying on a wider level the vote was against. What I think is worrying, regardless of the disagreement between the two of you, is that this rash, if we may call strike action a rash, is going to spread, isn't it? As people get more and more cross.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yesterday there were more stations had taken this wildcat strike action at the beginning of the day than had at the end of the day. By the end of the day, our information was that it was down to only 3 stations in the whole of London, and that's the information that we were given by our local officials. I don't think it will spread. This has been an incredibly disciplined dispute. We're dealing with a very disciplined group of people who have stayed on their stations without pay now for 20 weeks because that's part of the action answering
rely on
calls.
that too strongly if I was you. I mean, if you think that this won't spread, I think the union leadership are seriously misled on this matter, because we have got to a stage now, 20 weeks into this dispute, where we have relied for almost 14 or 15 weeks of that dispute on the public to pay our wages. Now that means that they're paying for a service twice. In fact, 3 times. They're paying for it in their national health contributions, they're paying for it in our buckets, and they're paying again out of the Treasury to put the army and the military on the streets. Millions of pounds which could have settled this dispute. How much longer are they prepared to keep paying 3 times? Their moral support will always be with us, I think, but their financial support must at some point start to be reduced. And that is going to seriously affect us. It's gone on for 20 weeks. Are they prepared to support us for another 20 weeks?
I want to, in a sense, take Donna off the hook. I know, because I think you are on a very difficult hook here. I mean, basically, as part of as the leadership, you say the last thing in the world we want is to destroy the image of ambulance crews by having strike action. On the other hand, it is plain that as this sore festers, the leadership is going to find it more and more hard to control that situation.
I mean, if I can just say, it's not just about the image. I think people have misconstrued this a bit, and there's been this sort of idea that the only reason why we've held out against the strike ballot is purely because we're into some sort of media kick. It's not that. I mean, our own view, and the view of all the members whenever we've had consultation meetings, like the one in London, the vast majority opinion is that it actually wouldn't take the dispute forward. And that's what's important in an industrial dispute. It's bringing the government to the negotiating table.
Let's bring in Jerry Hayes, because when we did this programme 3 months ago, quite a lot of the ambulance staff made slightly aggressive noises towards you.
Aggressive noises.
Since then, you actually have been reported in the newspapers as being a Conservative MP sitting on a very senior committee, trying very hard to get progressive movement which might actually get the dispute over. And it would appear, I'm sorry to say this, that whatever efforts you've made have failed. Do you find yourself in a rather embarrassing situation as being a Conservative MP arguing within the government's offices, as it were, for a change which will stop the ambulance dispute and getting nowhere?
I don't find it all that embarrassing. I find it very frustrating, because what we're all trying to do is get a speedy and honourable settlement. And the key has got to be the word honourable, because neither side must be seen to climb down. Neither side must be seen to be totally victorious.
You should be embarrassed, because 80% of the people in this country say that you should settle this dispute.
Just a moment. Some of us, it's not just me, it's a lot of people, are trying desperately hard to get a sensible, reasonable and honourable settlement. And we're working with the unions. And comments like that just don't
I
really
see your hand up. If your hand had been up in Parliament,
let me say
along
something.
with another 50 or 60 of your backbenchers...
I want to stop you. Let me say, you see, to be fair to him, am I right in saying that you have publicly stated your view and are doing your best to achieve a better pay deal for the ambulance staff?
Of course we are.
You believe they should be paid more money?
Of course
you
we do.
believe the government's offer is an inadequate one?
No, I won't put it as far as that. What? because if it was... Now, mate, if it was as
Right,
black
now, let him speak.
if it was as black and white as that, this dispute would have been solved ages ago. The fact of the matter is there have been a number of concessions. We've got the extra £6 million on the table, which Ken Clarke has put there. That can be reshuffled. Because don't forget, we're talking about last year's pay dispute.
That's all you do.
Just a moment. Just if you listened more, you might understand more. Now, the other thing we've got to understand is that the unions have made two major concessions. Firstly, Roger Poole has said, we are not going to push ahead for the full 11.3%. That's negotiable. We are not going to push ahead for linkage with the firefighters. What we are going to do is start thinking about a mechanism, and that's the key.
But if the unions have given ground on two major areas, why hasn't the government given ground in any area?
Well, the government would say that it has, but the trouble is, now this is the key now, this is the key.
This is the key, okay, let's hear it.
There is so much mistrust and so much misunderstanding on both sides that it's so difficult for all of us just trying to get the two sides around the table. And there are two mistakes. Will you just be quiet? Will you just
Right, now listen, I am actually going to stop the ambulance staff versus the government for a moment, because I want to get some patience, some people who actually feel that the ambulance service is an essential part of their lives. Given the present situation, where you can no longer be sure that a normal ambulance will come and that it is very possible that it'll be an army ambulance of kinds with a policeman with a route map telling the army corporal how to get there, what has life changed like for those people who have needed an ambulance service? Have you needed an ambulance?
Yes, I've needed.
In what situation?
I phoned 999 and all I've got is 20 questions.
I beg your pardon?
I phoned 999 and all I've got was 20 questions.
What were the 20 questions about?
Well, they wanted to know more details about my little daughter, where she, you know, they were going on, I'll pass you on to this and I'll pass you on to that. Eventually I found out if it wasn't, I had to rush her to an ambulance station and knock on the door, and knock on the actual door of the ambulance station. If I had to wait for the army, she would have been dead. She wouldn't be here today. If I had to wait for one of these organisations down there, she wouldn't be here today.
Are there other people who've gone through similar crises in terms of actually desperately needing help?
Yes. My son's an asthmatic and we had to call 999 for an ambulance and a police van turned up. We had to get in the back of a police prisoner van. There was nothing in that van, not even a blanket. And this ambulance man, the policeman, sorry, was doing his nut. He knew nothing. He didn't know what he was doing. 4 weeks later, I had to call again. It happened to be the same van. By then, he'd got a blanket, some oxygen, a stretcher, and believe it or not, a box of crisps.
But I mean, you're not really saying that these are negative people who are not trying. You're saying they're people who don't know.
They are trying, but they just don't know. They just have no idea.
Your father went into a heart crisis?
It could have been a heart attack. It turned out to be a blood pressure problem, but he collapsed, and so my mother dialed 999, and an army vehicle turned up within 15 minutes. This was the early hours of the morning, and 2 soldiers and a policeman helped my father, who was obviously totally unaware of what had happened to him, calmed down my mother, took great care and consideration of 2 old-age pensioners, and within 10 minutes of arriving at the house, they had them both at the hospital.
So you think they did an excellent
job? And stayed with them. They were marvellous, absolutely marvellous.
Well, does that mean to say that you feel that, as far as you're concerned, the ambulance staff can indefinitely be missing?
No, because if my father had a coronary attack of some sort, there were no machines or defibrillators in that army vehicle. Plenty of blankets, but nothing like that. Now, if my father had, as a result of any delay, had died, to be frank, I would not have blamed the army, and I would not have blamed the government, and I would not have blamed Kenneth Clarke. I would have blamed the people who were not on the end of that 999 call from an old-age pensioner.
So you feel that they would have been and are misbehaving?
The people that are suffering because of this aren't the government and aren't the health minister. It's the old, the sick, the frightened at the most traumatic times in their lives. They don't know the 9 or 8-digit numbers for getting hold of the stations. Everyone knows 999. Nobody forgets that.
Let me bring
they can't remember all the other 539, 380, whatever the numbers are.
Can I bring in Vernon Jolliffe? Vernon Jolliffe, you're down in Southampton. You couldn't get up to London because of the high winds and there's pressures upon your work, I understand. You're boss of the Association of Chief Ambulance Officers. You probably have heard some of these stories about army and police picking up rather than ambulance staff. Do you regard the future as an optimistic one in terms of the ambulance service whilst this situation exists?
No, I don't. I think both the immediate future during the dispute and indeed the future after the dispute is settled is something we view with a high degree of pessimism. I think we're in for a very difficult time and there is very, very little around, very few signs that lead to optimism. I would agree very much with what Jerry was saying earlier on. There's an enormous level of mistrust and misunderstanding on both sides, on the government side and on the trade union side. But if I could just go back to one of the earlier points as well, that the fundamental point you're making of should ambulance staff go on strike. I think from the point of view of a lot of chief ambulance officers up and down this country, many of the crews already are on strike. They are merely refusing to come clean and to say that's actually what they're doing. But if they won't honour their contract to the health authority and do the job that they are paid to do under the guidance and the direction of the health authority, then they are on strike, and I think it is beholding of them to come clean and be honest of the situation.
Can I ask you one short, rather difficult question then? Strikes at the end of the day, when the total walkout confrontation happens, tend to be the beginning of a solution. Because when the walkout happens, that actually, frankly, is when the whole thing is laid down on the ground and has to be sorted out. Would you actually, wanting at the end of the day to get the ambulance service back on its feet, working full time again, is there a bit of you which says the only thing that will sort it out is a full 100% strike?
No, because I believe that we're a civilised society and there has to be a better way than that. There has to be a better way than settling this dispute, and there has to be a better way in the long term of settling the ongoing issue of pay and conditions within the ambulance service.
And even if this rather bizarre middle-of-the-road situation, middle of a very unhappy road situation, goes on week in, week out, month in, month out, you're saying never ever should it become a total confrontation?
Well, I think, as I just said, I think in many parts of the country we are at total confrontation. Thousands of ambulance staff already are on strike, but only a few of them are prepared to actually use that word and admit that they are on strike and not doing the job they're paid to do.
I think he's looking to the answer to that. I'll be honest about it. Of course the action we're taking is a form of strike.
At the end of the day, you have to be honest about that.
Yes, we'd be dishonest if we denied that. But I've been an ambulance man for 20 years, and in 20 years, we've been struggling for justice ever since I joined the service. 20 years. This isn't something that's just come up overnight. And people are so frustrated, so fed up with the way we've been treated over the years that we've been driven to this. We don't enjoy taking this action. Let's make no mistake about it. None of us enjoy it. But we are absolutely fed up. And we're fed up with people like Vernon Jolliffe, who won't come off the fence and support his own men, which I think is disgusting.
Well, Vernon, you will be given a chance after our break to come back on that. We are going to pause for a couple of minutes. The debate will continue. The whole question about strike action and whether one day it will have to happen will continue. And some crucial piece of evidence, particularly from that man there wearing the London Underground badge on his sweater, will emerge about the fact that, sadly, it is true that death in accident situations to a certain percent is bound to be more likely than when the full ambulance service is at work. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Serve in my navy.
Yes, sir! Away!
And when each busy day is done, their striped, cod-filleted, golden crumb only birds. I know how they like their fish fingers to be. They make some fish fingers look a right motley crew.
And the captain's table for tea.
I only choose the best for the captain's table.
Imagine a shampoo this pure, this gentle. Timotei shampoo with natural herb extracts. Timotei rinses clean away to leave your hair soft and shiny, no matter how many times you use it. Timotei, all it leaves is beautiful hair.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Larry.
Hey, man, pizza.
Mm-hmm.
From your Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
Ah, could you spare a slice?
Sure. Help yourself.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Danny. Hey, what do you think this is, a takeaway service?
Pick up the phone and you've got it made.
Low-fat instant Horlicks, the natural way to relax.
Here are just a few of the thousands of people who won over £20 million playing Sun, Bingo and Lotto.
We've just won £25,000.
So how much did you win?
£110,000.
So send in your Sun Lotto entry now and hang on to your new Sun Bingo card. And remember, no newspaper pays out more.
What you got? Ketchup.
What's your ketchup? Real potato.
And ketchup. So what? Ketchup's on the inside. Inside, fluffy, crispy.
Potato.
Ketchup's new from Birdseye.
Welcome back. I'm starting part two of this programme with, I suppose, the most negative, unhappy story we have to table. Phil, you actually know of an accident situation where you are in no doubt that a death occurred because skilled staff were not available.
Definitely.
Well, tell us the story.
As briefly as possible, on the 13th of December, a man collapsed at the station where I work at 3 o'clock. 4 minutes past 3, we phoned for an ambulance. Nobody material.
999?
999. We have to pass it on to what we call our line control in underground, who dials 999. 5 o'clock, an ambulance turned up. 4 minutes past 3,
yeah.
The ambulance was called. 2 SRNs, 2 nurses on the station managed to keep the man alive until 25 past 3.
They just happened to be on the
They
station?
happened to be on the station. In fact, the man collapsed on one of them. And he died about 3:30. A railman managed to drag in 2 policemen from the street about 4:30. About 5 o'clock, a police van turned up with flashing blue lights and asked where the casualty was. They then left the station. 5:30, the police surgeon arrived and pronounced the man dead. At 7 o'clock, they picked the man's body up from the station in a bag. Now, the time that man was laying in the office, the foreman's office, the heater had been left on.
It sounds like a very unpleasant situation.
The smell was so bad for that poor man that the foreman was tipping aftershave around the office because the office was so small and the heater was on all that time. Now, that man, as far as I'm concerned, that man was left to die.
Do you think that had an ordinary 999 call produced a normal speedy ambulance turn out, he would be alive today?
I proved that by the next week. Exactly the same thing happened. The man collapsed in the morning. London Underground phoned up 999 as their instructions. They phoned up 999. I left the station, went across the road, phoned up for an ambulance. The ambulance was there within, I think, 12 minutes.
Well, you phoned direct through to an ambulance depot because you've got the right number.
Depot, yep. They were there within 12 minutes. The ambulance that the London Underground phoned was still waiting for that. And that was on the 20th of December.
Well, that is one unpleasant factual story. I move now to another unpleasant factual story. And ambulance staff, I know you're not going to like this one, but nonetheless it has to be tabled. You are a member of ambulance staff who, despite the views of other people, believe that you want to stay doing the full-time job and are staying doing the full-time job. Can I ask you the difficult question, what is the reaction to your colleagues been to you whilst you are still working full-time, doing every aspect of your duties?
Well, when I decided to go back, I knew I would get intimidation, but I was prepared to face that because the patients are suffering. I carry patients in, I'm on a day shift, and I bring them to and from hospital for treatment.
And to what extent have you been the victim of catcalls, etc., because you're still working full-time?
Well, I was told I wasn't welcome in the mess room anymore. I had my locker thrown outside. I've had my ambulance bleach poured all over the seat, dashboard, and the
Do you
radio.
Does one bit of you say, I can understand their anger, or does one bit of you say they are behaving very foolishly and very
Yes,
silly?
they are. Yes. I'm paid to do a job, and I intend to do it.
Can I just want one view, I want one view from one person, because I don't want to spend too long on this. I'll ask you, if a lady feels, as she does, that, OK, she's got sympathy with the problem, but she wants to carry on working, shouldn't she be treated generously?
Can she ask
no,
a
I'm asking her.
Can I just ask her, though, how long have you been on the service?
1 year.
1 year. Now, this man's been 20, I've been 5, and I think you'll find a lot of these have been 15, 20. Don't think you really know what's been going on with the ambulance service.
But if the pay deal was actually so bad, why did the trade unions accept it in the first place? That's my argument. Are your union leaders useless?
This is a lie that is told continually. All was said at the time was that they didn't feel by negotiations they could get any more than 6.5. Correct?
The offer.
And they said it would be put back to the membership.
Absolutely, they recommended it to members. If it's so bad,
hang on. Before you break out freelance, I want to table one. I've tabled 2 unpleasant facts. I want to table a 3rd unpleasant fact. Well, I think it's a. Well, you'll think it's an unpleasant fact. Your daughter wrote to the health minister.
That's correct.
He wrote back a long letter to you.
Yeah.
You wrote to him saying, basically, why didn't he give a decent pay deal to your dad and people like your dad who you felt were doing a very substantial, good job?
Yeah.
Yes? Would you like to read the paragraph in the minister's letter to you which you most disliked?
You describe your father's life-saving skills. The vast majority of ambulance staff have had no extended paramedical training at all. They are professional drivers, a worthwhile job, but not an exceptional one.
Well, now,
can I just come on that?
Yes.
That is...
Right, so the minister's definition was, and I'll ask Jerry whether he agrees with the minister's definition later, the vast majority of them are professional drivers and no more than that. What do you want to say?
Right, well, I'm a professional driver, and that is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard for a man of his position to say that. I was involved in the M25 pile-up, where there's 5 people killed, and myself, and there must have been 100 motorists involved. I was useless. I didn't witness anybody myself who was helpful until the ambulance crews came, who wasn't even on pay, and they were brilliant. So if I'm a driver, if they're drivers, I mean...
You're saying if they're drivers and you're drivers, they've certainly got different abilities to you.
There's something's wrong somewhere, isn't there?
Dad, it was your daughter's letter. You come next, sir. Yes, you?
The actual reply was a gross insult to all ambulance men.
Yes.
Mr. Clark's own professional driver, his chauffeur, which is calling me, earns 100% more than I do. The man earns between £15,000 and £25,000 a year.
How much do you earn when you're working full-time?
£10,888 per year. I have to go to RTAs, heart attacks, CVAs. Mr. Clark's driver taxes him round London.
The situation will be solved when they pay them the money they deserve.
But you're not making fair comparisons there.
Hang on.
You're not making fair comparisons at all.
Gentlemen here, then this lady.
90% of ambulance men's work is not involving any special skill other than driving. A lot of people. Out of 18,000 incidents, only 1.8 million actually involve special paramedical skills. And there are a lot of people in this country. There are a lot of people.
No, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Now, can I say something? Can I say something? Can I say something? If you want the public to recognise that this programme is trying to have a sensible debate, you will not bawl at each other because we'll get nowhere. Right. You have an argument you wish to state. I will ask people not to bawl at you while you state it. They will then bawl at you, I suspect, afterwards. Now, shut up for the moment, please. Right, state it.
The point is, a lot of people have to have some sort of special qualification. In my job, I have to have a first aid qualification.
What is your job?
I'm a university lecturer, and because I take people on field work, I have to have a first aid qualification.
Yes.
But the majority of university lecturers don't have to have that. But I expect more money for it, and I don't use it very, very often.
And are you saying the majority of ambulance staff are no more than drivers?
If you look at the figures, right, only something like 10% of ambulance journeys actually involving emergencies or accidents or any other special skill than actually driving.
Right, I am turning to our Conservative MP. Are you in agreement with him that no more than 10% of the ambulance service are very much more than drivers?
I think it's a wrong phraseology. If he would say, and I think that's what he meant, that the majority of the work is what's called day work, as opposed to emergency work, then he'd be right. And going back to Ken Clark's...
Does day work demand skills over and beyond driving?
It goes... Yes. I thought I was trying to answer the question. The fact of the matter is, yes, sometimes there'd be leading ambulance men. Obviously, they'd be trained in first aid. But I think if anyone other than Ken Clark had written that letter, they said, well, that's a fairish point. It was not meant to be inside.
Can I have one ambulance staff member who is not part of the emergency service setup? Who is not part of the emergency service setup? Are any of you not on the emergency service setup?
On their behalf.
All right, I wish we'd... All right, go on.
I'll be as unbiased as I can. The situation is as simple as this. These people that do the outpatients work that earn £7,000 a year, they are very important, they play a very important role in the support to the accident and emergency crews in the event of a major disaster. Right. If you take a situation like Clapham, you've got to get these people that are being called professional drivers into the area to get the walking wounded away and work along by the side of us. If we haven't got those people, then the accident and emergency crews are not able to get in and deal with the trauma.
Can I bring in... I've got the... before I have the poll results, I want to ask a doctor, dear. You're a doctor. What is your analysis of those ambulance staff who are not rushing to emergencies but are doing the daily routine work?
Well, you're asking me to reply to one specific point, and I think this debate is far more wide-ranging than that. I don't think you could take the thing out of context. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about mistrust on both sides, and I find that very difficult to understand because as far as the ambulance service are concerned, they've conducted a very honourable and carefully conducted strike. So I don't quite... industrial action.
Thanks very much.
So I don't quite see where the mistrust should be on the part of the government.
Is the average ambulance crew person more than just a driver?
Absolutely. all ambulance crew are trained...
I've got the phone results, too. I'll come to you after I've had the phone results. Interesting. Sorry, let me just tell you. The phone results are this. 60% of those viewers who have phoned in have said, yes, at the end of the day, if the ambulance crews have to go on strike, they should go on strike. That's 4,804 people have phoned in voting yes. 60% of the phone calls. 3,124 people, 40%, have phoned in saying no. At the end of the day, if they can't solve the confrontation with the health minister, they must not go on strike, because that is the point of no return. So 60% of those viewers have phoned in have voted yes, 40% have voted no. I want actually to say to you, what would you say to the 60% people who have phoned in a yes vote? And I then want to know what you had to say.
I would say that we've got a small window of opportunity for negotiation. Will you just be quiet? It has to happen soon. It has to happen soon. It has to happen really before the 30th, when we have the 15 minutes of action, because then attitudes will harden on both sides. Then there will be a strike, I suspect. There people, reasonable people like Donna and Roger Poole and other members who run the union will be out of control. The militants will take over, and then people really will die. And I suspect, Mike, if you then have a poll, I don't mean militant with a capital M.
Well, you do, because
if you then had a poll when people's relatives and loved ones were dying, it would be a very different one.
Sorry, no, Donna, 60% of viewers have said, although the leadership of the trade union is against strike action, they feel at the end of the day, if the unions get nowhere, they must go on strike. What have you to say to those 60% of viewers?
All I want is to get Kenneth Clark to the negotiating table. We've asked for that for 20 weeks now, and we've not got it. I think whether or not people strike is actually a bit of a red herring argument. Our concern is to get him to that negotiating table, and our view at the moment is the current action is the way to do it.
Vernon Jolliffe, down in Southampton, what is your response to that viewer vote?
Well, I'm surprised because, of course, the public are acknowledging the enormous risk that they are exposed to in the event of an ambulance strike.
But it is a fact. That's what they voted.
I accept that totally, and I think that's unfortunate. As I said, continually said, there has to be a better way.
I'm going to give 10 seconds. You've got 10 seconds, madam. You've been trying to say something for a long time. You've got 10 seconds to say.
Only that if it hadn't have been for the ambulance men, I had a very bad fall, and I was lying for over an hour. I managed to enlist my neighbour, phone 999, and it's because of their professionalism, and that's the word I want. And I can still walk.
Right, well, we've run out of time. Now, just let me give you a final reminder of that vote result. 60% thought that ambulance crews could and should strike if necessary. 40% thought they should not. And if you weren't able to get through to register the vote, it's because we've had a tremendous number of calls. Don't worry, the result of that is a fair reflection of what people feel. And you might like to know that tonight at 7 o'clock on Channel 4 News, Kenneth Clark and Roger Poole, the two men who had to solve the ambulance dispute, will each be putting their cases in 2 special reports. That's Channel 4 News tonight at 7. Goodbye from the time and the place. How many of you are full of frustration?